They turn up in plowed fields and river silt, in the damp dark of cellar hoards, and the tumbled edges of late Roman graves. Small, heavy coins, whose portraits look back at us with the blunt, official stare of an emperor. For centuries they were curiosities to collectors and cabinet makers, then to antiquarians and finally to archaeologists. Each of those coins carries a claim stamped in metal, a face, an assertion of power, an image of victory or a god. And yet the man on those coins was omitted from the public monuments of his rivals, scrubbed from official lists, and finally reduced in later histories to a few terse lines. The paradox is the kind historians like. Here is a ruler who left his image for all to see, and whose name was politely erased from the pages where emperors should be recorded. The coins are not merely relics. They are confession and counter-propaganda. They insist that someone once governed Britain and parts of northern Gaul as if the empire there had become his. That someone was Carausius. He appears in the record not as a senator parading by appointment, but as a naval commander who, having been given responsibility for policing the Channel and North Sea, turned his fleet and the loyalty of his sailors into an independent regime. His story sits at the intersection of three late Roman troubles: the pressures of maritime raiding along the coasts, the military assertiveness of provincial commanders, and a central government stretched thin across borders, rebellions, and economic strain. It is also a story about narrative, how the center of the empire understood and then erased a successful regional power. Carausius's early life is the kind of fragmentary thing that fills a detective's notebook. He was not a scion of Rome's storied families, but a man from the northwestern reaches of the Roman world, a native of one of the riverine tribes who lived along the coast of what is now Belgium and the southern Netherlands. He rose through the ranks as a soldier and then as a mariner. In the late 3rd century, the empire created a specialized naval command to police the increasingly dangerous waters of the English Channel, where Germanic raiders and pirates from the Frisian and Frankish coasts preyed on trade and coastal settlements. Carausius appears in the sources as the officer given charge of that fleet, an admiral in effect, with a mandate to rid the seas of raiders and intercept enemy ships. It was a post of enormous practical power. Control of the Channel meant control of communication between Britain and Gaul, the ability to tax commerce, to sink or seize cargoes, and to deliver or withhold victuals and reinforcements. The later sardonic Roman historians make clear the temptation that such a role presented. A man with ships and loyal crews could be very near to being a king. What matters less is wild legend about his motives, and more is the reasonable political arithmetic. The official record, written by men whose standards were loyalty to the court and to the central government, would later call him a usurper and a pirate. But the coins he struck and the reforms he ordered suggest a ruler who thought in institutions as well as in bribes. He needed revenue, loyal troops, legitimacy, and a story for the people he governed. Around the years when Diocletian and Maximian were trying to stabilize an empire exhausted by civil war, Carausius turned on his masters. Accounts vary about the exact spark. Some ancient writers say he was accused of collusion with the raiders he was supposed to hunt, pocketing plunder. Others suggest the court in Rome, short of cash and suspicious, moved to relieve him and launch a prosecution. What is certain is that in the late 180s, he took the bold step of declaring himself emperor in Britain and in the coastal provinces opposite the Channel. The leap was decisive and pragmatic. He already had a power base that was both military and civic, ships, soldiery, and garrisons that could be won with pay and promise. And his control of maritime routes meant that supplies and reinforcements could be shifted in his favor. Where the central state was indebted, overstretched, and distracted by Germanic incursions and internecine rival claims, Carausius built a compact regional order. This breakaway state was not a lawless pirate kingdom. Carausius set about governing. Coins are the clearest trace of this. Unlike banditry, which steals and disappears, he minted hard currency. Those coins, which surface now and then in hordes and stray finds across Britain and northern Gaul, were not simply money. They were messages sent into circulation. On some, his portrait takes the place of the emperor's. On others, Roman deities and military symbols appear, deliberately linking his authority to the language of empire. The imagery speaks in a Roman idiom. Neptune wields his trident, signaling mastery of the sea. Victory holds reeds, promising military success and public celebration. Legionary standards and laurel crowns promise stability and martial competence. The legends and the portraiture were meant to say, "This man exercises imperial power, pays the troops, maintains order, and protects commerce." They were, in short, a declaration of legitimacy in the primary medium ordinary people and soldiers encountered daily. He paid soldiers. That simple fact is a key to his endurance. A ruler who could not meet the payroll in a century when the army was the state would have melted in months. Carausius appears to have arranged a steady revenue stream. Control of the channel enabled customs and tolling. The fleets that patrolled the North Sea could intercept trade and levy fees. Ports and coastal towns that once fretted about pirates now found themselves defended by a regime with an interest in keeping commerce flowing. In the 7th or 8th year of his rule, when reports from the continent described trade resuming and the coasts being guarded, locals had reason to tolerate, perhaps even to prefer, a stable regional ruler over a distant emperor whose attention was divided. He fortified harbors, ostensibly to resist the Franks and Saxons. And he distributed donatives to secure the loyalty of soldiers and sailors. Carausius, his administration also grasped the importance of propaganda beyond simply stamping his face on currency. He issued coins that explicitly celebrated his role as the protector of Britain. Some series used imagery that tied him to the military community. Troops, veterans, standards. Others reached for civic legitimacy, allegories of peace, concord, or restoration. Where Rome's center relied on administrators and dynastic memory to confer legitimacy, Carausius built legitimacy through purchase and persuasion. Coins circulated through the hands of merchants, soldiers, and townsfolk, which meant his image was the image people saw as they paid for daily bread. In an age when literacy was limited, metal chatter did the work of discourse. Yet there are cracks in every regional kingdom. Carausius's hold on power sat atop a complicated topography of loyalties. He was an outsider by Roman aristocratic standards, and even among men who welcomed his administration, there would be prestigious senators and local magnates who bristled at his pretensions to imperium. The continental provinces he controlled, parts of lowland Gaul, shared the channel with the rest of the Roman world, and provincial governors who remained loyal to the central government found his existence intolerable. The court at Milan and Trier could not ignore a successful rebel who cut communications across the English Channel and claimed the symbols of Roman sovereignty. The emperor he defied was not a solitary figure. The period is better described as the Tetrarchy, rule shared among multiple Augusti and Caesars, intended to bring stability by dividing authority. One of Carausius's rivals was Constantius, who governed Gaul and the western provinces, and who would later earn the sobriquet Florus. The official record describes negotiations and propaganda campaigns against Carausius, as well as a series of military responses that, for a time, failed. Rome assembled expeditions, and the maneuvers along the channel were complicated by weather, misfortune, and the competence of Carausius's fleet. In one telling, Rome sent a fleet that was dispersed by storms, leaving Carausius unassailed. In another, internal politics at the court delayed decisive action. Accounts vary about how many attempts were made and how close Carausius came to being dislodged. What stands out is that he survived as a regional emperor for several years, a remarkable feat against the backdrop of an empire determined to maintain its unity. Carausius's downfall did not come at the hands of Rome, but from within his own household. His finance officer, a treasurer, whose name appears in the later sources as Electus, conspired against him and killed him. Here the accounts narrow into two things that almost always touch in ancient conspiracies: ambition and resentment. A treasurer, expert in the levers of taxation and pay, would have full knowledge of the state's finances and the loyalties that could be bought. Whether Electus's motive was naked ambition or a response to a real or perceived slight is not clear. Some historians have suggested that treasurers are always tempted by the immediate arithmetic of power. A well-funded admiral is also a man whose death can be turned into a chance to seize his ships and his soldiers' loyalty. Others argue that the treasurer may have feared for his life, or for his access to wealth, if Carausius's position weakened further. Accounts vary on how the murder occurred. Some ancient writers offer the image of assassination during a banquet. Others say it happened more covertly. In every version, though, the result is the same: a change of regime without the intervention of Rome. Electus proclaimed himself emperor, and for a few years attempted to maintain the breakaway state's integrity. He continued to strike coins and to rely on the ships and soldiery that his predecessor had organized. But a rule of force without the charismatic legitimacy Carausius had cultivated proved fragile. Meanwhile, the central government had not forgotten Britain, and in the mid-290s, Constantius Chlorus launched a renewed and focused effort to reassert imperial control. The reconquest combined naval action and land operations. Exactly how it unfolded is again disputed in the sources. One account emphasizes the role of a senior official and general, a praetorian prefect, who led an expeditionary force across the Channel. Another stresses a coordinated invasion in which naval superiority was decisive. Storms and fog, those persistent enemies of seaborne campaigns, may have played a role in the exact landing site and timing. What is not disputed is the result. Roman forces re-entered Britain with sufficient force and planning to break Electus's regime. The final moments of the reconquest are dramatic in the way military narratives often are. The breakaway fleet fought, some ships were sunk or captured, and Electus himself was killed in the fighting or hunted down soon after the battle. Roman forces disbanded the remaining pockets of resistance and reimposed the symbols of imperial authority. Coins of Carausius and Electus continued to be used locally. They did not evaporate overnight, but power in Britain reverted to Rome's hands. The central government then faced deliberately rewriting the story. Carausius would not appear among the Augusti in state decrees or triumphal inscriptions. In practical terms, the restoration required repairs to forts and settlements, reassertion of tax rolls, and in some places the reorganization of military commands. The tetrarchic system, which had been conceived as a stabilizer, put a premium on the appearance of unity and the swift delegitimization of rival claimants. In a political world formed out of images and public inscriptions, erasure was a tool. Why did Rome go to lengths to erase Carausius from the official narrative? There are obvious cynical reasons. An empire that tolerates the memory of successful usurpation invites imitation. Removing a rival from lists of legitimate emperors reduces the chance that a provincial soldier will see his rebellion turned into dynastic precedent. There are deeper ideological reasons too. The Tetrarchy developed a language of rightful succession and collegial rule, under which the Augusti and Caesars derived authority from legal investiture and from mutual recognition. Carausius's regime violated that schema in a visceral way. It displayed imperial insignia and minted coins, yet it answered to no higher authority. Erasure thus becomes part punishment, part pedagogy, a visual and textual lesson about where ultimate legitimacy resided. And yet the coins remained. They were too practical and too rooted in everyday life to vanish with an imperial decree. Hordes of Carausian coinage have appeared intermittently over centuries, from the earthworks of rural Britain to museum collections formed by 18th and 19th century collectors. Sometimes a farmer plowing a field brings a glint of bronze to the surface. Sometimes a building project reveals a cache left in haste. Each discovery is an invitation to recomprehend the past. The coins tell us something historians of political legitimacy and archaeologists of daily life both prize. The local persistence of a ruler's presence cannot be fully erased by changing inscriptions in distant capitals. Metal keeps its own memory. That persistence forces a reappraisal of Carausius's rule. He was neither a mere pirate nor a fully legitimate emperor, but a figure who exploited the ambiguities of latent power structures. He answered to the immediate needs of sailors, soldiers, and merchants, and he presented himself in a language his contemporaries understood, that of Roman imperial imagery. At the same time, he challenged the norms that the tetrarchs were trying to enforce. His ability to hold a swath of the Northwest for several years shows the structural weakness of the central state and the resourcefulness of provincial command. His demise by murder and the relative speed with which Rome recovered Britain underscores another constant of the period. Imperial unity was a political project as much as a military one, and the center could wield overwhelming resources when it chose to concentrate them. The treatment of Carausius in later histories is revealing in its omissions and its tone. The official narrative frames him as an example of the kind of disorder Rome will not tolerate. When pannae and friezes were cut and lists of emperors assembled, his name was bypassed. But even as the official architects of memory labored to forget him, his coins and the physical work he commissioned, fortifications, harbor works, paybooks long since rotted away, did not simply dissolve into oblivion. They continued to shape the lives of Britons and continental provincials for decades. In a fragmentary way, they remind us that memory is layered. Public narratives insist on certain truths, but economic and social realities preserve others. The story of Carausius is also a commentary on how authority is won and preserved in moments of crisis. He was a man who worked the levers available to him: naval control, currency, pay, propaganda, and built a functioning polity that satisfied many of the people under his rule. The same tools that allowed him to be strong also made him vulnerable. Control that depends on a narrow set of relationships can be turned if the person at its center is removed. That is exactly what happened when Electus, who knew the state's coffers and whose ambition matched the moment, took power by violence. The internal betrayal is a recurrent Roman moral in which private greed and public consequence blend. Look at the coins again, and you see the irony. The faces on them were meant to train eyes into recognition, to make transacting and loyalty a single act. They are small, durable, and persuasive things. They outlasted rhetorical excoriations and official silences. In the end, centuries after Carausius' death, and long after the Tetrarchy had itself transformed into later imperial forms, the coins continued to surface and remind us of a brief experiment in regional rule. They are evidence of someone who governed rather than merely raided, of an authority that mixed administration and force in a way that worked for a time. The final beat in such a story is rarely tidy. Rome reclaimed Britain and restored a so-called normal order. Yet the episode raised questions about centralization, provincial agency, and the resilience of local power that would recur throughout the later empire. Carausius is a shadowy figure precisely because he occupied a middle ground, not a legitimate heir of Augustus, not a barbarian king, but a maritime potentate who operated within Roman forms and then beyond them. The official erasure did not erase the practical truths his coins attest to, that a man could declare himself emperor by controlling the sea, by satisfying soldiers' pay, and by convincing local communities that his rule was a better alternative to the chaos that often nipped the fringes of the empire. When you hold one of those coins in a museum case, or see a hoard glinted in the mud of a British field, think of the choices that made its existence possible. The empire's need for defenders, a commander's decision to turn power inward, the treasurer's knife, a continental ruler's patient campaign to reassert control. Think also of the way narratives are written and unmade. The polished faces of metal won't tell you who was noble and who was venal, nor will they explain every motive, but they do tell a practical story of authority manufactured and circulated, of propaganda and payroll, of a temporary polity that functioned long enough to leave its imprint on coin and coast. For all Rome's power to expunge, material culture had its own stubborn memory. The question that lingers is not just how Carausius got away with ruling Britain, but why, in an age of constant flux, so many people found it preferable to be governed by the pragmatic ruler in the Channel and by a distant court whose favors were costly and slow. That is a question that echoes, in different shapes, through every time a province weighs the comfort of local order against the claim of distant legitimacy.